Okay, we're going to go ahead and call this city council workshop to order for Tuesday, December 5th, 2017. Let the record show that the entire council is present. And first thing on our agenda is our discussion items, discuss agenda items for regular city council meeting of December 12th, 2017. That's next week. First thing there is our minutes, MN 17-028. Consider minutes of regular city council meeting of November 26, 2017. Any questions or comments on the minutes? All right, seeing none. Moving on to our resolutions, RS 17-118. Consider memorandum resolution authorizing the procurement of ammunition for training and duty use for the police department. And Chief Kimball, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Before you today is a request to purchase police ammunition, training and duty ammunition for the police department. The purchase is in excess of $50,000 from a single vendor, GT Distributors Incorporated, which we have used before to purchase ammunition. The purchase will be cumulative through the duration of fiscal year 18. The anticipated cost of the ammunition is $95,000. Funding is allocated in the FY18 budget. The ammunition will be purchased through Texas Smart Buy and the TASB Buy Board, purchasing cooperatives in compliance with the competitive bidding processes. It is our recommendation that council authorize the city manager to execute the purchase of $95,000 in ammo from GT Distributors, Inc. throughout FY18.
All right, any questions for the chief? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to RS 17-119. Consider memorandum resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation for reimbursable STEP grant funds. And Chief Kimball, you got that one?
Yes, sir. Again, good evening. Before you today is the reimbursable for the STEP grant. It's the annual Texas Department of Transportation Special Traffic Enforcement Program grant, STEP. It's combined enforcement for DWI, speed, safety restraints, traffic control devices, and distracted driving. It allows our office to focus solely on traffic and safety education without having to take calls for service. The total grant program is $198,000. Grant funds are $124,933 with a city match of $73,937. It's broke down through salaries, benefits, and mileage to come up with the match fund. Staff recommends that the City Council authorize the manager to accept the reimbursable Texas DOT Special Traffic Enforcement Program grant and the funds in the amount of $124,933.
Any questions for Chief Kimball? Mr. Rivera.
Hey, Chief, I got a small question. Compared to last year and this year, did we do better this year in that grant or last year?
So I don't have last year's numbers right in front of me. If you give me a chance to research it, I'll make sure I get it to the manager where he can distribute that information.
Don't worry about it. I just was curious. I always keep an eye on those grants.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Chief, I have four quick questions.
Okay.
One, I received a couple of emails from citizens, and they asked, are the operations of this program typically carried out in visibly marked vehicles?
Are they carried out in visibly marked? We say visibly marked. We have two type of vehicles that is carried out. One is our traditional markings that you see. They're black and white, and then we have some that are carried out in the probably the newer style. They're white on gray, and they have reflective markings on those.
Right. So is it going to be? Are these officers going to be using the traditionally marked vehicles?
They'll be using both, because those ones in the silver and gray, the newer ones, our traffic unit has those cars, and our traffic unit typically carries out the STEP program, but some of our officers do it in traditional cars also.
Okay. I was just curious because a lot of the questions were just more concerns that they feel like it was more of a speed trap, that you were trapping the citizens because the vehicles were not, in their opinion, were not properly marked. That's not my opinion. That's just the concern that I received from citizens.
Yeah, they're marked, but maybe not as visible.
And then the second one is, in the staff report, on the financial impact, it says the department would be reimbursed monthly for $124,933 total in salary costs for overtime expenditures. The question is, does that mean that personnel participating in this program would be on additional duty overtime pay, or is this just regular shift?
This will be overtime.
Overtime, okay. And then the third one, I guess you can email me when you get the info for Councilman Rivera. What amount did KPD budget for overtime for this fiscal year?
I'll have to research that and
Okay.
get that off the budget. I'll email that. I'll get it to Mr. Olson. He can get that to you.
And then just one more.
Yes, sir.
I lost a lot of my documents. I was trying to keep up with all the COPS grants, all the grants that we've applied for. Is there a way that I can maybe get, when time permits, maybe the last 3 to 5 years of just all the grants that KPD have applied for and received, just so I can kind of have a better understanding? And then from there forward, I can have my own database and I can just add them in. I'm asking you that because I lost my documents, so I don't, yeah.
Just so I'm clear, you want 5 years or 3 or?
If you can provide 5 years, that'd be good. I don't want to hold you up with a lot of
No, we'll go back
information.
5 years, all the grants that KPD applied for and received.
And receive, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Rivera?
I don't mean to sound negative on the question that they just asked you. But is any way possible that you could put more vehicles non-marked, so those people who violate, we really could catch them?
That's an operational question, and I'm not prepared to do that. But we use the vehicles that we have. We have to make sure, one, that the priority that our calls for service are answered. And those are priority. This is an overtime program, so once we have the personnel and the equipment, and then we use what we have available.
Just was wondering if you could do that or not. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can I just ask, just for clarification, because I know that Councilman Johnson mentioned the COPS grants and you're going to provide that, but I know when we do the COPS grants, that's something that is a long-term. It tends to run out after maybe 2 or 3 years. And then the city has to come back and find a way to fund it. But the STEP grants that are here, there's no type of payback. That's just, you use that money and that's it.
Yes, sir, and we get reimbursed.
Yeah, and you get reimbursed, so we don't have to, as a city,
Put up anything.
put up anything.
No, sir. We turn in our mileage for our cars, the time that we use,
Yeah.
and the gas that we use, and then we ask for reimbursements.
Okay. All right, any other question? Mr. Harris?
Hello, Chief. Just ask this question, when the grant period does run out, will we be, is it customary to be applying, already being prepared to apply for another grant to help cover that? Or is there like so many times you can actually apply for that grant?
It's been, from what I can tell and talking with staff since I've been here, the STEP grant kind of reoccurs every year. So we just we know that window of time when it's going to come. So we just prepare ourselves that when the announcement comes out, then we apply for it.
Okay. And I was going to ask this question as well. I'm not sure if you'll know it, but how successful have we been in getting when we get to the point where we reapply for the grant, how successful have we been over the years of getting the grant again?
I'll double check, but I do not believe we've been turned down for the STEP grant.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Kilpatrick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I believe it's covered and everything, but like in the last resolution we talked about, the funds were, on the presentation, it said funds are included in the 18 budget.
Yes, sir.
The match funds that we will put in the order of 73,000 plus, that is in the 18 budget.
Yes. We are reimbursed for the monies that we use.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Rivera?
No, Mr. Mayor, I just want to go back to the Texas DOT grant because it has nothing to do with Department of Justice, DOJ grant. That's something different than this up here.
Yeah.
I don't think the DOJ grant that we're talking about has nothing to do with this.
All right, anybody else? All right, thank you.
I do have a number for Mr. Johnson for that overtime number you were wanting. Ms. Shine gave it to me. It's $1,016,069. I'll get that other information for you.
All right, moving on. RS 17-120, consider memorandum resolution authorizing the city manager to accept grant funding from the Petco Foundation for the Police Department's Animal Service Unit Adoption Preparation Program. Mr. Chief Kimball.
Before you, Mr. Mayor and Council, is the Petco Foundation 2017 grant. The Petco Foundation provides money for animal services throughout the country. It will provide spay, neuter, and vaccination vouchers to customers who adopt animals in need of services. It provides spay, neuter, vaccination services to animals prior to adoption, when possible, and it promotes and supports animal services unit adoption program and events like the one, like our animal services unit here that we have with the city. The total grant program is $70,000. We will use $45,000 for vet service vouchers, $20,000 for vet services prior to adoption, and $5,000 to support and promote adoption events. The city's match in this is $0. The city staff recommends that the city manager be authorized to accept the grant funding allocated by Petco Foundation, which will be managed and tracked by the Animal Services Unit in collaboration with the Finance Department to aid in the shelter's adoption program.
All right, any questions? Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not a question. Wanted to give a commendation to the city manager and all interested in this. This is an excellent program, and it's an excellent way we're searching out other resources to meet our, not only the budgetary, but to meet our goals within the animal services, everything. So I commend them for being aggressive in getting grants of this nature. Thank you,
All
Mr.
right,
Mayor.
great job. Mr. Okrie.
Mr. Mayor, this is more of a comment specifically to Mr. Ed Tucker, who is the supervisor over there. He's been doing a good job finding money where we can't, where we don't have it. He finds it, and with these grant opportunities and apply for them. He let the Animal Advisory Committee know about this this grant here, and he's always looking for something. He's got solutions. So hats off to Mr. Tucker.
All right. Anybody else? Mr. Johnson.
Question for the city manager. Does the city have a grant writer, or is each department responsible for writing their own individual grant applications?
Each department is responsible for their own grant writing. Some departments, the bigger ones particularly, are more skilled at it than the smaller ones.
Thank you.
And just as a last comment, if I remember right, I think last time we got this, it was at 50,000, wasn't it? So it's actually an increase from what we had last time, so that's good. All right, anybody else? That's it. Thank you, Chief. Next is RS 17-121. Consider memorandum resolution authorizing the purchase of uniforms for the fire department. Chief Brank, welcome.
Good evening. Mayor and council. So the Killeen Fire Department is wanting to purchase uniforms. Let me get the right one. And the Killeen Fire Department provides uniforms for our firefighters, including pants, shirts, coats, and gloves. We did price comparisons with 3 different buy boards. One was Miller Uniforms and Emblems. One is Nardis Incorporated. One was Class Uniforms Incorporated. Miller Uniforms and Emblems provided the best price offering. The alternatives were to purchase uniforms from various vendors as needed, or purchase uniforms from a single vendor at the lowest cost. This conforms to city policy. Miller Uniform Emblems buy board contract 524.17 is effective through March 31st of 2020. The financial impact is approximately $100,000 each year annually for 3 years. The budgeted expense, we have the money budgeted, and there's no additional money needed. Staff recommends that the city manager be authorized to execute the purchase of uniforms from Miller Uniform and Emblems Incorporated through its buy board cooperative contract, and that the city manager be designee is expressly authorized to execute any and all change orders within the amount set by state and local law. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
All right, questions for Chief? All right, you're good on that one.
Thank you.
RS 17-122, consider memorandum resolution authorizing the purchase of consumable medical supplies for the fire department. Chief Brank.
is basically almost a duplicate of the last one, except it's medical supplies, purchase of consumable medical supplies. The Killeen Fire Department uses consumable medical supplies in the delivery of emergency services. We did price comparisons on commonly used items between Boundtree Medical, these are buy board comparisons, Boundtree Medical, Southeastern Medical Supplies, and Henry Schein. The lowest price offering was Boundtree Medical. The alternatives were to purchase consumable medical supplies from various vendors as needed, or to purchase consumable medical supplies from a single vendor at the lowest cost. It conforms to city policy through Boundtree Medical's buy board contract 5/30/17 is effective through May 31st, 2020. The financial impact is approximately $150,000 annually for 3 years, and it is budgeted and there's no additional funding required. Staff recommends that the city manager be authorized to execute the purchase of medical supplies from Boundtree through its buy board cooperative contract, and the city manager or designee is expressly authorized to execute any and all change orders within the amount set by state and local law. Be happy to take any questions on the consumable medical
Questions on
supplies.
this one? All right, you're good. Thank you, Chief. Next, RS 17-123, consider memorandum resolution approving a use of a request for proposal, RFP, for the selection of a vendor for redeveloping of the city's primary website and to develop a companion mobile app. This is Shine, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. State law requires that City Council make a determination that using the request for proposal process provides the best value for the city. And so I'm here tonight to ask you to make that determination for our website redevelopment project. City Council approved funding for the redevelopment in the FY18 budget to improve and expand public access to city information and services. KilleenTexas.gov is the site we're talking about. It's the city's primary website and serves all departments. It's our web thoroughfare. It is our biggest, broadest reach that we have as far as web sites are concerned. Our current site was developed in 2009. It uses a proprietary content management system that's no longer supported by the creator, and so we have limited functionality, which inhibits maintenance and expansion. It's reached the end of its serviceability, and it has an antiquated framework and function, so the time is now. Our current annual usage, it has 600 pages, 1,500 linked files, 2.1 million page views, 900,000 sessions, 443,000 users. And something that I'd like to point your attention to is that our mobile usage is now predominantly, or our computer usage, or I'm sorry, website usage is now predominantly mobile versus desktop. That's a change that has occurred since the first site was developed in 2009. The major project goals for this are to improve public access and customer service, to modernize the design using current web best practices versus those that were implemented in 2009. We want a mobile-friendly design to cater to those users that are using tablets and cell phones. We want to be able to integrate images, videos, plugins. We need to increase our storage, traffic, and service capacities. We need secure and reliable hosting. We need to upgrade our compliance so that it meets current disability standards. It needs to be created in a way that optimizes search engine function. And we are intending to also create a complementary mobile application. So this mobile app will hopefully provide more customer service to our residents. So the alternatives in this process would be a sealed bid, which would be difficult in this kind of a project because it is so subjective. And so we're recommending a request for proposal be used. And the reason that we think that that's the way to do it is because it offers the flexibility that we need to meet those defined goals. But then also it allows staff to evaluate other factors. So versus just looking at price, we can look at the content, the qualifications, experience, references, fees, timeline, and determine best value utilizing that criteria. So after selecting a vendor, staff would be able to negotiate a contract for the scope and fees, and the contract would then be brought back to City Council for your final approval. So our recommendation is that Council determine that the RFP process provides the best value to the city for redevelopment of the city's website and authorize staff to proceed with issuing an RFP.
All right, questions? Mr. Johnson.
Comment.
Yes, sir.
I would love to have a page dedicated to quality of life events. It would be a one-stop shop where citizens can go to figure out what the current happenings is. Hot funds, heads and beds, new revenue.
Got it.
All right, Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number, next to last item on project goals, search engine optimization.
Yes, sir.
Does that mean multiple search engines would be applicable? You wouldn't tie just to one search engine?
No, the intention would be, or do you mean Google versus, yes. So the intention is to build the website in a way that optimizes that. So by creating specific words, specific phrases, things that build up that, the search engine usage pushes us closer to the top of that list. And it would be across the board to all search engines.
Meta tags, they call them meta tags.
Yeah.
Mr. Herrera.
With this application, is any way possible, maybe I'm heading the wrong way, for people to be able to put in for permits and other things that we really need to get away from the waiting and the back and forth and so forth, they have the requirement on the website, and they could apply on the website, they could pay on the website, and get it over with?
So that's actually, the city manager and I have talked about this extensively, and his intention is to create a web-based business center. And so right now, we offer some services online, but they're very limited because of the structure that we have currently in place. And so our goal would be in the future to figure out what those services are that can be provided online, and that could potentially realize future savings because they're able to do them in a more efficient manner. The web, or I'm sorry, not the web, the mobile application that we're looking to do would allow people to submit work orders, pay their water bills or fines that would integrate some of those business services that we have. But we do have, I have a list in my office of some of the things that I think we could be offering online. And some of those are going to require a third-party vendor to provide whatever the framework is that makes them possible. But that's kind of what we're doing. We're building the framework here that will support that in the future.
Well, it looks to me it is under work, so let's wait and see. Thank you.
And the good thing about an RFP, it allows us to evaluate things that we may not have even thought about. And so, because some of these people that do it for city governments, and I know that there's probably things ideas they can come up with, especially when it comes to being more transparent with a lot of our documents and stuff, put them online and stuff, so.
Well, and tonight because I know the website, I knew exactly where to go to look for that number, but the residents aren't as familiar with where things have been placed on the website. So our goal is going to be to elevate those things, those facts and figures or commonly needed pieces of information to the surface so that people can readily access them.
Good.
I just have one
Mrs.
question.
Fleming.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think this is going to be an outstanding project, and once we get it up and moving, I think it's going to really move Killeen forward. And I'd like to thank you for all you've done in working with Tom on this, and the city manager. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it. Thank you very much. All right, next, RS 17-124, consider memorandum resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an amendment to a previously approved advance funding agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation to design and construct an extension to Rosewood Drive and Heritage Oak Hike and Bike Trail Segment 3. Mr. Olson, welcome.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a lot of words there to say a short phrase. What we're looking at, we have currently 2 funding commitments from the federal government for our Rosewood Drive, Heritage Oaks Hike and Bike Trail projects. The first is a Category 7. These are roadway funds that are committed through an advanced funding agreement. That's a contract we have with TxDOT to secure those funds for that project, also referred to as an AFA. Category 7 funds, we have $5,003,585 currently, and that goes towards the Rosewood Drive and Heritage Oaks extension adjacent to it. There's a separate funding agreement that has Category 9 funds. These are transportation alternative funds in the amount of $640,000. Those are specifically towards the trail project. In the recent past, we had some additional funding come available in the Category 7 funds. And Killeen's project for Rosewood was selected to receive those additional funds in the amount of $356,414. That brings our total funding in federal dollars for the Rosewood Drive Heritage Oaks project to $5,999,999. And you'll recall, we originally set out asking for $6 million there, so we're pretty darn close to being there. There are two alternatives to consider here. The first would be a do-nothing. This keeps the same funding agreements we have in place and rejects the additional dollars. The second piece that we're recommending here is to execute an amended agreement and allow us to secure those additional federal dollars for the project. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Mr. Rivera.
Sir, I know this being videotaped so people can see this on the website. Is there any way possible, very quick, can you explain what Category 7 is so people understand, and what is Category 9? So
You bet. Category 7 funds means that those funds are available to use on a roadway construction project or any other transportation means. They can go from anything from roadway to hike and bike trails, sidewalks, even public transit has been awarded Category 7 funds in the past. Category 9 funds are called transportation alternatives. So that means that we're looking for non-motorized vehicular traffic, hike and bike trails, those sorts of things are eligible to be funded under the Category 9 funds.
thank you, sir.
Anybody else? All right, thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to public hearings. PH 17-050A, consider memorandum resolution authorizing the acceptance of rifle-resistant body armor grant through state funding for the police department for purchase of rifle-resistant body armor. And Mr. Locke, are you doing both of these, or, because I can read them both if you are going to do them both. So I'm going to read the second part of that way. PH 17-050, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance amending the FY 2018 annual budget and planning municipal service of the city of Killeen by increasing the revenue and expenditure account for the acceptance of rifle-resistant body armor grant program funding. So, Mr. Lott, you got both of these.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. This is a new grant that the police department applied for, and prior to receipt of the grant, the city council has to formally approve the grant, and that ordinance needs to be sent to the granting agency. Just some background on the grant. This is a state grant through the Office of the Governor, the Criminal Justice Division. It provides rifle-resistant body armor to police officers. And after the committee review, the armor was selected by GT distributors through the buy board process. The total amount of this grant will be $127,350. There is no matching fund requirement for this grant, and the grant funds 100% of the armor and the armor carriers. So staff does recommend that City Council authorize the city manager to accept the rifle-resistant body armor grant in the amount of $127,350 and to execute the purchase of the body armor from GT distributors. Part B of this is a budget amendment. This grant was not included in the original FY18 budget. And as we just discussed, this grant will cover 100% of the equipment cost, so there is no impact to the general fund to acquire this equipment. This budget amendment will increase revenues by the $127,350 and increase an expense account in the same amount. I touched on it earlier that we haven't formally been approved for the grant, so we're putting the a budget and a reserve appropriation, and upon receiving acknowledgement that the grant has been approved from the grantor agency, then we'll allow the police department to move it out of the reserve appropriation into their expense accounts to be spent. Staff recommends that City Council approve the budget amendment authorizing the amendment of the FY18 budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Mr. Johnson?
You can get it.
Mr. Okry? I didn't see him raise his hand.
Oh, I thought, okay, never mind. Just a comment for the city manager. I support police officers ensuring they have the proper equipment to protect themselves in the line of duty, as well as be able to protect and serve our citizens. I know this is a one-time grant of $127,000. I'm just looking long-term, just ensure that we have some plan to budget to afford the replacement of those plates in 5 years. Now it's $89,000. That doesn't include inflation. I just don't want to get into a situation where I'm approving things and then later down the line we don't have a plan for it. And so I would feel more comfortable that as we get closer to that period, if you and I are still here, that we are able to reevaluate these things and just ensure that these vests were needed and we have data to back it up to say, hey, let these vests need to be replaced. They saved this many lives and so forth.
Mr. Okry?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments along the similar, pending with the fiscal policies that either be approved or disapproved. This will, with grant funding like this, that will be taken care of as far as the funding for replacement through the policies, correct?
I don't think the policy guarantees that it will be funded, but it sets the framework for us to think ahead and plan for that. And I would just kind of remind the council that we are still facing substantial challenges. I mean, body armor is only one thing that needs to be funded into the future for replacement. We have buildings, we have equipment, we have lots of very costly things that the city owns that we still don't have adequate plans for replacement into the future. So the fiscal policies, the financial policies lays the groundwork for us to identify those and to think about it and try to find solutions for it, but it doesn't guarantee the outcome, as it can't. I mean, we still have to figure out the long-term funding strategies for the city.
Right, so plausibly, well, for a grant well, this is a 5-year replacement, so plausibly the process of trying to find the source or the resource for replacement will be 5 years, what, halfway mark or third year or somewhere like that?
Right, and we do have part of our budget process, and this is in the budget financial policies, is that we look long-term. So we are looking 20 years out. How do we make our city financially sustainable for 20 years? We do that because we want to take into account our obligations to bonds and debt service that go out that long. Right. So we will be looking at that. I have some issues with it. My secretary either has or will shortly be contacting each of you for a sit-down with me first week of January and have some conversation about what that long-term strategy might look like. And I think it's premature to say we have an absolute solution, but we're working on it. And I don't know what else we can do besides that at this point.
Thank you. And I apologize if we kind of went off, but I know that this went off the, I don't know how far we got off the subject with that, but I know that this is something that's not a one-time thing.
Right.
And along with the other things that you're talking about.
Mr. Harris?
I was going to say, the same thing crossed my mind, but I'll say the reason, even like Councilman Johnson said, I support the best equipment for our police officers. And even as that part crossed my mind about how we're going to pay for it later on in 5 years, for me, I guess the encouraging part, because I'm putting faith in all of us, that 5 years is not a long time off, but it's 5 years. So I have to believe in myself that we can come up with $81,000, or, as it says here, or even including the cost of inflation in 5 years. That's my hope. And if that doesn't happen, that would be highly disappointing to me. But in the meantime, when I look at this, it's a grant. It's for 5 years. It's going to protect our officers. So to me, that's worth the investment. But at the same time, like I said, I do believe that we can, as a body, work to generate that amount in the next 5 years. Like I said, that's what I'm having. That's what I'm putting my faith in.
Mr. Rivera.
I understand we got challenges, and I understand that we got to do some other things in other places. I also understand that when we send public safety personnel out in the street to fight people who got bullets and shooting at you, or you run back, they run forward. And the things in Killeen is not changing a bit. They're getting worse by the day. And I think it's our job. If we can't find it, we better start working instead of come over here and just talk about it. We need to start working and really start doing our homework. And what can we do, not 5 years from now, but like the city manager said, 20 years from now. But I'll be damned if I won't be sitting here and I won't let one of those public personnel go and challenge then criminals, and we're not going to support them with the equipment they need. I don't need a phone call saying that we lost one of the finest because they didn't have that equipment. And I don't care how much it costs. It's a homework that we have to do. Sure, we got other departments, but only few out there filing people. Matter of fact, those people got better weapons than they do. Just think about it.
Thank you. Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Locke, did I understand from your presentation that this has not been approved yet? We've not been approved for this grant?
Yes, sir. The part of the approval process is a resolution of support from City Council, and that's what this process will establish.
Okay, I wanted that to be clarified to the citizens, that we're basically, this is not the cart before the horse. This is, we need a resolution first and a commitment to this prior to, and that's what we're really discussing, because I don't want it to get out of context that this is a done deal.
Right.
The grant may or may not be approved. We'd anticipate it being approved, and that's what we'll give our support for. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Mrs. Fleming.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also like Mr. Kilpatrick. Am I understanding you to say that you do need cooperation from the council to make sure that we are in consent on all this? I'm definitely for this, because I think we've got to take care of our police officers. We can't wait until something tragic happens in Killeen. And like Mr. Rivera said, someone comes up dead because we did not come forth. And it is our responsibility to come up and protect our police officers, because there are people out there, anybody can buy a rifle, those bad, the semi-rifles or whatever. And if we are not equipped to protect our officers, then something's wrong. And I think we do need to support this all the way. And I do support this 150%.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you. All right. I think that's it.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Locke. Moving on, PH 17-051, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance requested by Furman Moore on behalf of Andrew Strawn, case number Z17-25, to rezone approximately .270 acres, being Lot 15A, Block 1 of the DN subdivision replat from B5 Business District to R3F Multifamily Residential District. The property is generally located on the west side of Courtney Lane, approximately 200 feet northeast of the intersection of Shawn Drive, and is locally known as 3103 Courtney Lane in Killeen, Texas. Mr. McElwain, welcome.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. This particular item does involve Mr. Moore seeking to have a fourplex rezoned. It was part of a development that was put in at a time when Killeen had one zoning pyramid, and essentially commercial and residential were both allowed in the B5 zoning district. He's trying to reconcile the non-conforming zoning. I believe he's looking at some financing situations, and they're requesting that the property be brought into compliance. As the mayor mentioned, it is part of the DN subdivision. It is currently designated as general commercial on the future land use map. The property sits at 3103 Courtney Lane, and there's, as you look at Courtney Lane as it runs toward East Central Texas Expressway, the property, it's fronts on that street. In our review of the case, we received no protest when we sent out surrounding property owner notices. The Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation to the City Council is for approval of the R3F zoning district. That's the existing fourplex unit right there. Subject to your approval next Tuesday, when we have these non-conforming areas, we tend to take note of them and then bring them all into compliance. I anticipate us notifying all of the property owners to have them brought into compliance. I'd like to answer any questions that you all have.
Any questions for Mr. McElwain? All right, moving on. PH 17-052, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance requested by Mitchell and Associates, Inc. on behalf of CPB Investment Inc., case number Z17-29, to rezone approximately 1.414 acres out of the Thomas Robinette Survey, abstract number 686, from AR1 Agricultural Single Family Residential District to B3 Local Business District. The property is located on the south right-of-way of West Elms Road, east of Clear Creek Road in Killeen, Texas. Mr. McElwain.
Yes, Dr. and Mrs. Mitchell comprise CPB Investments. Since the punch-through of the western extension of Elms Road, they have been entertaining offers for their property. And this most recent offer is for 1.4 acres of land. The property is not too far from the Department of Public Safety office. It is my belief that this will be a driving school. Remains to be seen if that's what takes place. But they're requesting approval of a B3 zoning to take it out of its current AR1 designation. This corridor is quickly developing into what we think will be a mixture of mostly commercial uses. There might be some residential components, but it's taking shape as interest comes in. In our review of the case, we notified 3 surrounding property owners. We didn't receive any responses. The Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation for you, council, is for approval of B3. This is a picture that our senior planner, Ms. Mesher, took. It does overlook the site that's in question, and I'd like to answer any questions that you may have about this property.
Any questions? Seeing none, moving on. PH 17-053, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance requested by the Clean Engineering Survey Limited on behalf of RSBP Developers, Inc., case number Z17-28, to rezone approximately 1.738 acres, being part of the W.E. Hall Survey, abstract number 1116, from B3 Local Business District to R1 Single Family Residential District. The property is located on the north right-of-way of Chaparral Road, 3,200 feet east of East Tremere Road, Killeen, Texas. Mr. McElwain.
Council, this is a tract of land, it's on the screen nearest you, that Mr. Purser had rezoned from R1 to B3 back in 2014. At the time that we met with him, his intent with the build-out of Heritage Oaks was to allow for some commercial component. He has since entertained changing his mind and doing some rerouting of some of the roadways in there, and he wants to remove the B3. He doesn't think it's probably realistic at this time. We're inclined to agree based on what we know about Chaparral and his development plans. The item before you would essentially reverse the decision you made in 2014. So back then, you took it from R1 to B3. This simply takes it from B3 back to R1. With that being said, that's the site as it stands today. It's not part of any kind of a development scheme where we had any specific requirements for the property. He was just simply seeing if there might be some market interest. We have no objection to it. When it was presented to the City Planning and Zoning Commission, they had no issues. There were no protests received. The recommendation for you, council, is to simply zone it back to R1 for the acre-plus area of land there, and I'd like to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, moving on. PH 17-054, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance requested by Chasey Zimmerman of Stratus Properties, Inc., on behalf of the Killeen FM 440 LLC, case number Z17-27, to rezone approximately .080 acres being part of the West Killeen Market Subdivision, Block A, Lot 2, from B5 Business District to B3A, Local Business and Retail Alcohol Sales District, to allow for package store sales. The property is located at 1103 Old FM 440 in Killeen, Texas. The property houses the existing West Killeen Market. And Mr. McElwain.
Yes, the West Killeen Market Council is the location of our newest HEB there at Fort Hood Street and West Ancelita Loop. That black box that you have in the center of the corner lot is this location. It's an existing suite. A few years ago, the developer was under the impression that the B5 zoning would allow for package stores. In our sit-down meeting with them, we did tell them they would have to rezone this area to allow that to happen. And so they're petitioning you for approval of a B3A zoning. I believe it's going to be a specs package store. I could be wrong, but I think it's going to be a specs. But in our review of the case, we did note that the applicant's current development meets all the city's regulations with regard rather to masonry, the amount of stone that's on the property. We also have requirements as far as setbacks and location relative to schools and churches, and it meets all those criteria. There were no protests received, and the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation for you is for approval for this area to be rezoned to B3A. As investment interests continue, we may have more rezoning to occur. It's a little fluid now with the market and what we're seeing, but we are grateful that there's interest, and we hope to see all these lease spaces fill up relatively quickly. Now I can answer any questions that you have.
Any questions? Mr. Johnson.
I have a question without opening up a can of worms. It's too late for that. I looked at PH-17-051 all the way down to the current one, and Commissioner Harkin has abstained from each of these. Is there a reason why? That's 4 or 5, and I just thought of that as I'm looking through. I didn't have enough time.
Ms. Harkin did not state on the record the reason for her abstentions. We have reached out to her in hopes of gauging if there are some issues, but I have nothing to report to you just yet.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else? All right, seeing none, moving on. Item number 18, PH 17-0558. Hold a public hearing and consider ordinance requested by Peyton E. Duncan, flume number 17-26, to amend a comprehensive plan future land use map from estate to general residential designated area for approximately 54.226 acres being part of the W.H. Coley Survey. Abstract number 200. The property is addressed at 405 Tower Hill Lane in Killeen, Texas. Mr. McElwain.
Council, this is a two-part request. Its first part involves an amendment to the future land use map. You'll notice here in the last several months, we have been receiving quite a few requests along the Fort Hood corridor to have properties removed from either estate or rural land use designations. The intent is that the property owners out here are receiving some interest from the development home building community to open up their property for more development to occur. In this particular case, Mr. Duncan is the property owner, and he owns this rectangular tract that we have highlighted on the screen. He has observed like development along his property to the south and to the west, and he would now like to have the property transition from estate to general residential. The state land use designation typically contemplates home sizes of approximately 1 to 5 acres. It allows for a more rural setting. As you see, this is quickly transitioning to anything but a rural setting. In our review of the case and presentation of it to the Planning and Zoning Commission, we dictate that there has been a lot of development interest. We think it would be a good thing to transition this tract to allow for development to occur, because we think those are drivers for other investment, non-residential investment along the frontage of 195. If approved by you, essentially the map would transition from estate to general residential as we have on this graphic. And the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission is for approval of this future land use map amendment. This approval does not remove anything with regard to the University Cemetery District. It's just simply allowing a wide variety of uses to occur. Also be mindful that general residential does allow low-intensity commercial within this area. So I'd like to answer any questions you have regarding the request, and then there's a accompanying zoning request for this item as well. Do you have any questions about the future land use map before I move on? Okay.
None. Let me read the last one. It's PH 17-55B. Hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance requested by Peyton E. Duncan, case number Z1726, to rezone approximately 46.196 acres from agricultural to R1 single-family residential district, 7.487 acres from UD Universal District to UD Universal District with a conditional use permit for R1 single-family residential housing, and .543 acres from the CD to the CD district with conditional use permit for the R1 single-family residential housing, for a total of approximately 54.226 acres out of the W. Cole Survey Abstract Number 200. The property is locally known as 405 Tower Hill Lane in Killeen, Texas. Mr. McAway.
Yes.
Man, that was a lot. So-
It is. Council, I want to direct your attention to the map graphic. I'm going to do this a little bit different than how the PowerPoint slide has been laid out. I think it'd be easier for you. Mr. Duncan, this is the zoning map, and Mr. Duncan's property is mostly zoned ag, that's in green, but that area that you see in blue that arcs across his property, the majority of that is the University District, and then there's a very small sawtooth area. That is the Cemetery District. Those two districts require approval of a conditional use permit for something other than strictly residential use. So that's the driver for the conditional use request. The total acreage for those two areas, Cemetery and University District, is a little over 7 acres. It's not much land at all. The majority of his property actually lies outside of those districts. The item, as we brought it forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission, this took place over long negotiations with Mr. Duncan and his agent. The staff is recommending a mixture of different land uses. We're trying to be sensitive to the topography, but also to some of the homestead tracts that are out there. To that end, what we're proposing, and what we propose rather to the Planning and Zoning Commission, is for the area in dark blue, the darkest blue, to transition simply from agricultural use to R1 use. The purple area and the light blue area are those portions of the property that are subject to a conditional use permit for single-family housing only. The green area is to transition from ag to AR1, which is a 1 acre lot minimum. That's a hill that's there. And we thought that if we could reserve that for larger lot zoning, it would be more attractive as you transition to more measured controls along the western boundary of the site, which is the Cemetery University District. And then south of there, you basically just transition to R1 housing for the property. I'm going to go back because the recommendation as it was presented from the Planning and Zoning Commission is for the following. It's for approval of 40.026 acres of land. That's the darkest blue area. That's basically R1 zoning. The green area is 6.17 acres of land. That will transition to agricultural, single-family residential, 1 acre lot minimum. Any portion of any residential lot that lies within the University Cemetery District would be approved by a conditional use permit. Now, the standards of the lots in this area would essentially match the standards of Splawn Ranch Phase 5, which was a project done by Mr. Bruce Whitus. We think that as you transition from his neighborhood to at least the first row of housing in this neighborhood, it needs to match. So what we did was we went back and we looked at what the council required of Mr. Whitus. It was an average lot size of 8,600 square feet, an average lot width of 70 feet, and that's as measured from the 25-foot building line, so you get a wider lot. Same yard setbacks as in the R1 district, which is 25 feet front and rear and 7 feet on the side. We ramped up the landscaping standard to match the suburban residential district that requires fully sodded yards and 2 trees to be planted. 90% stone, stucco, brick for all floors, stories, and all 4 sides, excluding gables, eaves, windows, basically architectural elements that aren't subject to typical masonry standards we've left out. And all other single-family housing outside of this westernmost row of housing would just default to your standard R1 zoning. So imagine, if you will, if you drive in, the first or most westernmost row of housing would meet these standards. The housing to the northeast corner would be 1 lot to 1 acre to 1 to 3 acre lot, excuse me, in size. And then as you transition to the majority of the subdivision, you would default to R1 zoning, which would essentially match what we have as you go south. Mr. Duncan has acquired a lot in the adjacent subdivision that Mr. Cosper developed to punch a road through. Mr. Duncan is not a developer. He's simply a property owner, so whoever actually acquires the property would have to meet these standards. And essentially, you have 2 means of ingress egress, one through Splawn Ranch Phase 5 and one to the subdivision that Mr. Cosper owns to the south. To answer the questions you have, I can go back to a map graphic if you have some confusion there. I just want to make sure it's kind of as clear as can be to you at this time.
Mr. Rivera.
Let me see if I got this straight, okay? You take in and you're doing, they're requesting a CUP for the university and the cemetery combined.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why we did not entertain doing a separate CUP?
Well, you have 2 distinct districts. So when I say combined, we basically combined the request on 1 petition, but you, through your action, would approve a CUP for that percentage of acreage.
So that's 6 point something.
Yeah, well, you've got 0.543 acres within the cemetery district that you would be approving, and you've got 7.487 within the university district. So both of those approved by, residential uses approved by a conditional use permit in both of those districts. So it becomes a little convoluted, but essentially you are approving 2 CUPs,
Yeah.
one for each respective district, and AR1.
We're not gonna go ahead and do just 1, we're doing 2.
You're doing 2, right.
Just wanna make sure. that-
Yes, sir. I want to make sure the council understands.
Yeah.
2 CUPs will be approved, AR1 zoning would be approved, and R1 zoning would be approved, and it essentially would match that map graphic where you basically will have the majority of it being R1, large lot zoning in purple, and anything in those two districts that are University District and Cemetery District will be approved per a CUP.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Mrs. King? All right.
And we don't have a development proposal yet. It's not a PUD. What we'll simply do is see when investor takes interest in the property and work with them. And be mindful, council, it's your decision as to how much of the property you want to rezone. If you're fine with this we thought was a very good, logical use of the property, and it does encourage some large lot zoning, because a gentleman due north of him left his land open for some larger lot zoning as well.
Mr. Kilpatrick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand that completely, Tony. I think one thing on the diagram that may be a tiny bit misleading is.
Yes, sir.
Is the two CUPs.
Yes.
And the verbiage, I understand it correctly, those are CUP R1s.
Yes, the CUP is strictly for the approval of single-family housing only.
That's
Yes, sir.
very, very critical to us,
Yes.
because we've lost the ability to plat.
Yes, okay, that's what you're
So
saying.
when it goes to the P and Z for platting, if it's just a CUP designation, they can put a business in there.
This is
Under a
strictly for
conditional use
housing.
permit business. We have to make certain that when we do our motion, that is a CUP R1 for both of those areas, because we certainly do not want a business opened up in either one of those districts, interdisposed right in the middle of residential property.
All right, Mr.
Thank you.
Okrie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. McElwain, because this was, when I was reading this, it was about as clear as gerrymandering.
Yes.
Yes.
Trying to
yes.
figure that out, but thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, anybody else? All right, I think you're done,
All right,
unless you have anything else.
thank you.
All right, so that's going to bring us back to our discussion items. And so DS 17-118, briefing, Senior Advisory Board's annual report. Mr. Brett Williams, you do not look like Sean Payton. And there's Sean.
Yes, sir. Mayor, City Council, Mr. Manager, I'll introduce to you
Hey.
Mr. Sean Payton, who's the president of our Senior Advisory Board. Just want to give a big kudos to him, the work he's done with this group over the last year. This report has not taken place in excess of 20 years, but he's got the group together. They're mobilized, they're doing activities, and I just want to say thank you to him in front of the body.
Oh, I agree. I think he's got one of the most fun jobs in the city. Every time I go out there, they're having a bunch of fun out there.
Good
Welcome,
evening,
Mr. Payton.
Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Manager, City Council, City staff in your respective places. It is a privilege and an honor to be able to stand before you to give this report. So I want to start with our mission statement, if I may. And our mission statement is to advocate for a senior program that ensures the inclusion of programs that provide assistance to senior citizens in the areas of nutrition, fitness, finance, and emotional support for senior residents of the greater Killeen area. Membership, Senior Advisory Board is comprised of 11 members appointed by City Council. Now, that is a increase because originally it was 9 members, and we increased it to 11 members. The board members are as follows. Sean Payton is president, Marjorie Banta, vice president, Rosa Key is secretary, Ms. Tommy Fetting, Ms. Navis McDaniels, Ms. Kim Harris, Ms. Patsy Bracy, Mr. Larry Eagley, Mr. Klaus Adams, and Ms. Patricia Holland. This is our senior outreach. Now, we've done 3 programs over the course of 2017, and this was our first senior health fair, and we had over 700 attendees and 51 vendors offered free goods and services to the senior citizens. And we had another one Friday, September 15, 2017, and we had over 500 attendees and 44 vendors offered free goods and services to the senior citizens. And lastly, We hosted the Fall Festival, October 26, 2017, and we estimated about 300 kids to show up, but over 3,000 actually showed up in attendance. And the seniors themselves donated supplies and volunteered at this event. And before I open the floor for any questions or comments, I would like to myself extend my most humble gratitude to Mr. Brett Williams and Ms. Roxanne Ahmad. If it were not for them, ladies and gentlemen, we would not have been able to put on the events that we did. And also, I would like to give a big congratulatory to the city staff as well that works along with us day in and day out. I know you guys have a heavy workload, and we certainly appreciate all your help with the Senior Citizen Advisory Board, and I'll have any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Payton? Mr. Johnson?
Big shout out to Margot. She is outstanding.
Absolutely.
She does a great job at the Bobby.
Yes, sir.
She's actually been helping me learn how to cook, so.
There you go.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
All right. Mr. Kilpatrick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is success. You look in the dictionary, and I don't care which language you want to do, you'll see this advisory board as success of not only in its accomplishments, but in how it works and how it has been able to accomplish itself. And it leads to the fact that one thing that I'm awful proud of, the city of Killeen, our diversity is an asset. It is not a liability, and it's proven in this advisory committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, well said. Mrs. Fleming?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to say thank you, Sean, for everything you've done. and
Yes, ma'am.
Christine and everybody. And I would like to say September the 15th, I think that we helped that day when you had that health fair.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
it was awesome because Mr. Okra and I was up there trying to give out those gifts.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
the gifts that they donated was awesome to the crowd. It was very nice. I really did enjoy that.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I would do it again when we have another one too.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm also on the advisory board.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, fantastic. Look at all those kudos you got, so it's
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
appreciate it. Thank you
Yes,
for
sir.
what you
Thank
do.
you. Thank
All
you.
right. All right, our last item, DS 17-119. This is a planning session. And in this one, what we're going to do is discuss city council protocol. And so what I want to do in discussions with our city manager here, one of the things that I would like to do is just create a mayor's ad hoc committee. Have 3 council members. I think it'd be a great idea if we go into like a committee and then we can present. And so I asked a few of you guys if you want to be part of it, and Mr. Rivera, Mr. Harris, and Mr. Johnson to be part of that committee. And Mr. Rivera, if you can chair that and, figure out what times you guys want to meet. I know we can probably accommodate you guys' schedule, but does anybody disagree with that? Everybody okay with that?
Definitely.
All right.
Great. Good
Mr. Rivera.
I got only one concern, and that is, just want to make sure the all city council members are going to be there, because I ain't doing no workshop, or, no committee meeting at 5 o'clock. Okay, Mr. Harris?
All right.
Well, then you got a problem.
I think this could be a great committee. I appreciate what you guys are going to do. I think I picked the right people.
Okay, hold on, I got a suggestion.
We got to discuss it here.
I know, I just got a
All
suggestion.
right, Mr. Harris.
Okay, I suggest, I make just a suggestion that, based on the biasness that's already been provided for us, in order to not negotiate, knowing somebody has a job and we don't all have our own businesses, we can't all leave at the same time, and like the citizens can't get here at certain times. And so I think that, I won't volunteer myself, but I think that Mr. Johnson should be the chairperson, simply because he's already shown a bias to me already. And I know it's a true statement.
Well, the chairperson typically, doesn't vote, so, I mean, I think that it'd be important. But, if you guys
Okay, so-
work it out on your own, I don't mind. That's
Right,
my,
So the chairperson doesn't vote, so if Greg and I vote to have it at a certain time, and it's 4:30 or something like that, and are you gonna show up?
I ain't going to show, let me tell you what,
There you go. Okay, so that's what
Mr. Mayor, point real quick.
we need to get somebody else.
I'm going to be honest with you. When you apply to be a city council and the citizens vote for you, they expect you to do the job.
Okay, I agree. And you guys are going to have help with the staff. Mr. City Manager is going to be part of that, and he got a handle on that. So with that, that's it. You guys are on it. Any further items for discussion? Nope. Saying none, we just need a motion to adjourn.
Just to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Kilpatrick, second by Mr. Rivera. Did you have a question before we adjourn, Mrs. Nash King? No? All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.